Next up, we have Braxton Jones, the offensive tackle out of Southern Utah, and he's an interesting evaluation. He really is, because you surf the internet and you look at some of these big boards, and a lot of people have him going in the 5th round, 6th round. Some people haven't even scouted him, and I understand it, right? Southern Utah guy, you might not look too far into him, but for me at least, Braxton's a guy that I was a big fan of. I put him in pretty solidly in my 3rd round grades, and I'm recording these Friday morning when, I think I'm trying to record guys that I believe are sort of surefire day 2 picks, and I don't necessarily think Jones is in that category, but if evaluators in the NFL see some of the traits that I saw, I think somebody's going to fall in love with him and take him earlier than the vast majority of people expect. So why do I like him? What is so positive about his game? The first thing, I'll start off with my very first note. Extremely high football IQ, really impressive, sniffing out stunts and twists way before they happen. That's something that I can't stress to you guys enough in terms of not only the importance, but the ability that he was showing off. The sort of cognitive feeling out process of recognizing, hey, this 5 technique is a little bit tighter on me this rep than he has been the previous 5. I think he's slanting across my face. Then you see Braxton, first step, set inside opposed to outside, which is a little bit of a risky maneuver. Next thing you know, that guy slants inside right into right into the chest and the waiting arms, I should say, of Braxton Jones. It felt like just extremely cued in. One thing that my college offensive line coach always said was, you got to have your spidey senses tingling. I don't know if Braxton's ever are not tingling, right? Because it just always felt like he knew what he needed to do. Now, sometimes he couldn't always execute. I will say that. Sometimes, it would look as though he's in the process of recognizing something. You can see him trying to react to it, like trying to work back out to, say, a looper coming back around the edge. Maybe he just didn't necessarily have the foot quickness to get there, but he was always keyed into it, and that's what I really liked, because at the next level, things are only going to get more and more complex. So having somebody who diagnosed the college game as well as they did, I thought that was certainly a positive. In terms of the other positives, just taking a step back and speaking more generally, his frame was certainly a positive, I would say. Although it's worth noting, he was listed as 6'7", 310 on the Southern Utah webpage. Came into the combine at 6'5" and a quarter, so a little bit shorter than we might have thought. But where I think the size shines through is actually in his arms. 35.375 inch arms, which again, of all these tackles that I've done grades on, besides like Daniel Falele, those are some of the longest arms that anybody has had. So he's got this nice big long frame. In terms of some of the testing measurables, in terms of the 4.97 40-yard dash, which is in the top 95 percentile of all offensive tackles that have ran the 40 at the combine historically. A 7.59 3-cone, which is a great time. A 4.84 shuttle, which that to me is kind of what I was talking about before. That's not the best time. That's sort of on the other end of the spectrum, and I think that comes back to maybe the foot quickness not being his strong suit, but 26 reps on bench, which was fine. A 9-foot broad jump, which was very impressive, right? We're talking about a guy who has a lot of physical tools, a lot of mental tools, and if you can kind of key him into what you're trying to do schematically and work with him on some of these weaknesses that we're about to get into, I think we have a very very high ceiling prospect that maybe just a lot of people aren't keyed into quite like I'd like to think I am. Maybe I'm completely wrong and I'm overselling some of his strengths because they were on display, against some more questionable teams, right? We're watching him against San Jose State guys rather than Georgia guys. So maybe some of my positives that I have are only perceived positives, right? There's a possibility of that. And then maybe he is, say, a 5th round pick. It is what it is in that regard. But in terms of some of the negatives, we'll start going through some of these. First one I had was foot quickness, not always his strong suit. Can struggle with wide speed rushes, quick inside moves, and interior reach fits as a run blocker. So what I mean by that is when you're a left tackle and your task is to get to the inside shoulder of the 3 technique, so not the shoulder that is right lined up on you. you have to work to the opposite shoulder, work through him, and cut him off from making a play going in the other direction. It felt like sometimes he didn't have the foot quickness to get there. In terms of the speed rushes, like I said, with his big frame and with his length, he didn't always have the longest way to go because like I said, he had a longer, he had a better chance at getting guys with those long arms. But I thought that he could have benefited from some quicker feet, no question. Just in terms of working his kick slides and gaining depth, I thought that maybe he could have done a better job at times, especially against like those wide 9 rushers, which maybe he won't see as much at the next level as he did in college, where perhaps some of these smaller schools were just trying to get creative. But it was something of note, I thought. Another note that I made, his hand placement. I thought that it could be rather high and at times miss entirely. And, that's the worst thing that can happen for you as a tackle. You kick out one-on-one on an island, you're about to engage with this explosive defensive end edge rusher, and you throw your hands right before he throws his, and your hands go right over top his shoulder pads and completely whiff. You give up your chest, you let them get into you, and at the next level, against those athletes, they're going to have to be scraping you up off the quarterback because you'll get bench pressed right into them, right? So I think he has to refine that aspect of it. Be able to recognize quickly, is this a speed rush? Is this a bull rush? No. Do I have to get hands on, their chest? Do I need to get hands on their near shoulder that they're trying to dip and get around the edge? Where should I throw my hands? And he needs to really work on refining the accuracy by which he does so. Another thing I thought, occasionally more so as a run blocker, could struggle with his leverage at times. As reps progress, that was another note that I had, could get high up on his toes. Generally, that's what you want to do when you're finishing reps, right? Like if you're about to pancake a guy, that's when you're going to be really up on your toes. There were times where he would just be stalemating up on his toes, and that's not necessarily great. And I actually thought that could negatively influence his ability to anchor at times when he was up too high. And like I said, giving up his chest. They always say, quote unquote, low man wins. Well, with Braxton, it felt like there were times where, he was kind of giving that up willingly, right? Otherwise, I thought that the mobility was interesting because he had good testing results in terms of the combine. I didn't necessarily always see those when it came to climbing to the second level and getting a linebacker. When it came to, like I said, some of those more athletic inside blocks, like a reach block, for example. I didn't quite see the quickness shine through on tape, but maybe that's something he's been really working on hard in the off season and will come in at better than how I graded him. So in that regard, in terms of some of these grades, just very quickly, I'll rattle them off. I gave him an 18 out of 25 on Pass Pro, just because I think, one thing I think are those hands, but especially those feet as well, dealing with some of those speed rushers. I gave him an 11.75 on run blocking. I don't necessarily think that's his strong suit. He can do it, yes, because he is a big, strong guy, but the physicality wasn't always quite there. And I actually think he projects better as a pass blocker long term than as a run blocker, I'll be honest. It just felt like with his leverage, sometimes he was leaving his hips behind him and he wasn't really engaging, all of his lower body into some of his drive blocks and things of that nature. So I gave him an 11.75. I think there's like a lot of these things are workable, which is what I like. And if you take that high football IQ and you apply it elsewhere in terms of maybe the weight room to get stronger, or the film room to tune some of these things up, or the practice field, obviously, I think some of these are issues he can work through. The hands, the hand placement, that's just getting on a sled and firing, right? Or getting some live reps with guys coming at you and varying things up in terms of giving you the shoulder versus giving you the chest, right? Things of that nature. Just has to really fine tune the hand placement. One thing that coaches will always say is aim small to miss small. It felt like at times Braxton was aiming big and missing big, right? Whiffing entirely, going over the top of the shoulder pads, as I said. Some other grades just very quickly. I gave him a 6.5 in both balance and power and strength. Like I said, not always the most physical guy. I gave him a 6 out of 10 there. These aren't bad grades. They're, above average for certain. And I think with that being said, I already mentioned the very impressive quickness and IQ. I gave him a 4.75 on size and length, 2.75 on athleticism, which, a lot of people might not love given some of those combine measurements, but like I said, I just thought they didn't always shine through. And I was a little bit more worried about, say, the 25.5 inch vertical or the 4.84 shuttle. I was worried about those sort of quick twitch explosive movements because that's what I didn't see in his game, right? So I thought that there was some consistency there, and I docked him as such. So all in all, came out to a 74.63 as you see on the screen. But for me, he's a high ceiling guy. He's somebody that, like I said, I think evaluators could really fall in love with. They might not. I could be completely wrong, but a lot of NFL teams, they want their tackles to be big, long, good athletes, which I think you could argue that's what the combine showed, especially in some areas, maybe some more so than others. But he's got a powerful frame, he's got great length, high football IQ. Then can you just, iron out the kinks? I think that'll be the question. And if somebody thinks they can, I wouldn't be shocked at all if he goes in the third round. And I feel like if he does, he'll be one of those picks where, some people might be scratching their head, who the heck is this guy? Well, I would say in that regard, he's a solid, he's a solid prospect to tackle. Don't get it twisted. Just because you haven't seen him or watched him play yet doesn't mean that he can't play. And in that regard, I was quite impressed by what he brought to the table. So, with that being said, if you were impressed with what I brought to the table, if you enjoyed just hearing me generally discuss some of my pros and cons regarding Braxton, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I assume most of you guys are here after your team took him, so I'd be very curious to hear your thoughts, especially pertaining to where they got him. Was my third round evaluation, which for me, that's just reflective of where I would feel pretty confident taking him. That's not me saying, like, oh, if he goes in the second round, that's the worst pick of all time, right? It's not that at all. I just have him graded, from my perspective, as a third round guy. But I think if he is someone you get in the fourth or the fifth, there could be some really good value here. As, like I said, you iron out those kinks and hopefully help him reach his fullest potential. With that being said, that's all I have for you guys in this one. I'm mic'd up, now I'm mic'ing out. Peace, guys. I will see you next time.